August 1942. The Pacific War had entered its most brutal phase. Across jungles, beaches, and volcanic rock, the United States Marines were locked in a relentless struggle with the Imperial Japanese Army. Among the Japanese forces was a small, lightly armored machine that Imperial Command had once called the pride of its armored corps, the Type 95 Hago light tank. Yet when the Hago finally met the Marines on the battlefields of the Pacific, it became a tragic example of how technology, arrogance, and outdated strategy collided in the face of modern American firepower. The Type 95 Hago was designed in the early 1930s when Japan was fighting in Manchuria and China. The Japanese army did not expect to face heavily armed opponents. The Hago's purpose was to support infantry, crush light defenses, and move quickly across rough terrain. Weighing only 7.4 tons, it was incredibly light. Its thin armor, and between 6 to 12 millimeters, could stop rifle bullets but little else. It carried a 37-millimeter main gun and 2 machine guns, one in the hull and one at the rear of the turret. During its early service in China, the Hago performed well. Chinese nationalist forces had few anti-tank weapons, and the Hago's mobility proved effective in fast offensives. However, this early success deceived Japanese planners into believing the tank could stand against Western armor. By 1941, Japan had expanded across Asia. Imperial war planners underestimated the technological gap between their equipment and that of the Allies. The Hago was still in production when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and became the main tank of Japanese armored regiments throughout the Pacific. Meanwhile, the United States military, though initially shocked by Pearl Harbor, adapted rapidly. American forces began to deploy heavier weapons, better logistics, and, crucially, a doctrine emphasizing firepower over speed. The first major encounters between the Hago and U.S. Marines occurred during the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942-1943 when Japanese forces counterattacked the Marine perimeter around Henderson Field. They brought several Type 95 tanks. It was the first time many Marines had ever seen a Japanese tank. When the Hagos advanced across open ground, the Marines opened fire with 50-caliber Browning M2 machine guns, mounted on jeeps in defensive positions. The heavy rounds ripped through the Hago's thin armor as if it were made of cardboard. Eyewitness accounts describe Marines laughing in disbelief as the tanks burst into flames or their crews bailed out in panic. One Marine reportedly said, "We didn't need the bazookas, the 50s chewed." The Hago's flaws reflected a design philosophy that no longer fit modern warfare. Its riveted armor often turned into deadly shrapnel when hit. The 3-man crew was overworked. The commander also acted as gunner and loader, leaving him overwhelmed in combat. There was no radio in most units, forcing tankers to use flags or hand signals, nearly impossible under fire. Meanwhile, the Marines coordinated through radio networks, artillery spotters, and air support, giving them overwhelming tactical superiority. At Tarawa in 1943, at Saipan in 1944, and again on Guam, the Hago appeared and died the same way. American Sherman tanks, weighing nearly 5 times more, crushed them easily. A single 75mm shell could destroy a Hago from hundreds of meters away. The Japanese tankers fought bravely, often to the death, but bravery could not overcome physics. On Saipan, one Marine unit reported that their half-track mounted 50 cals destroyed an entire platoon of Hagos within minutes. As the war turned against Japan, the Imperial Army began using Hagos in desperate and improvised ways, as static bunkers, suicide charges, and ambush traps hidden in jungle foliage. In the Philippines and on Okinawa, Hagos were dug into the ground, their turrets serving as stationary guns. Yet even in these roles, they were quickly neutralized by bazookas, grenades, or napalm. By 1945, the once proud light tank had become a symbol of futility, a relic from another era, still being thrown against an unstoppable enemy. To the Marines, the Hago became less a threat and more a target of grim humor. Combat footage and veteran interviews later revealed a consistent reaction: astonishment at how fragile the Japanese tanks were. The Browning M2 50-caliber heavy machine gun, designed decades earlier, proved devastating. Its armor-piercing rounds could penetrate 20 millimeters of steel at close range, more than enough to punch through the Hago's sides and even its frontal plates. As one Marine gunner on Tarawa recalled, "They rolled toward us like toys. We fired and pieces flew off. It wasn't war, it was target practice. The story of the Hago reflects a deeper lesson about warfare. Technology and doctrine must evolve together. Japan's military belief in spiritual willpower could not compensate for material inferiority. The United States, though inexperienced at the start, quickly mastered combined arms tactics, coordinating tanks, artillery, and infantry with air and naval power. The Hago was never truly a bad tank by 1935 standards, but by 1942 it was already obsolete. When the war ended, hundreds of destroyed or abandoned Hagos were scattered across Pacific Islands. Some were used by local farmers as tractors, others rusted into jungle relics. To military historians, these wrecks became stark symbols of Japan's misplaced confidence and technological stagnation. The Marines' laughter was not cruelty, it was disbelief. The sight of a so-called armored tank, shredded by machine gun fire, revealed how uneven the Pacific War had become. The encounter between U.S. Marines and Japan's Hago light tank stands as a reminder that courage alone cannot win wars. The Imperial Japanese Army sent its men into battle inside machines already outdated, against an enemy that learned, adapted, and improved faster. The .50 caliber Browning became a legend of American firepower. The Hago became a lesson in obsolescence. Where the two met, laughter and tragedy coexisted. One side amused, the other doomed. By the time Japan surrendered in 1945, the Hago had vanished from the battlefield. Yet its story endures, a relic of an age when steel and strategy met, and only one evolved fast enough to survive.